Ave viewers! Competitive online gaming is dying. No, I'm not talking about UG sports and esports orgs, even though those are also dying. I'm talking about games themselves and their competitive structure around them. I'm sure the handful of subscribers I currently have all went, oh boy, here we go again. But for once, I do mean it in a general sense. I'll try to share my point of view on the matter through three overarching points: game maintenance, transparency with players, and the most important point for last, an healthy competitive environment. By this point, I'm pretty sure every gamer on the planet have heard the term slash idea of flavor of the month, game of the moment, etc. We all saw games that were extremely popular for like a week or a month and somewhat died off or completely died. I miss you, Knockout City, even though you died for completely different reasons. Some of that responsibility comes from the general population lack of will to deep dive into a game and perfect it to a crisp. Usually by the point where that flavor of the month dies off is also where the game companies tend to panic and try to retain that initial influx of player and compromise on the integrity slash initial direction of said game. There is a difference between maintenance and additions. Lately, we've seen companies trend in the additions lane pretty hard, especially in character-based competitive games. Looking at you, Riot, and also Blizzard. If you add too much to a game too quickly, the game will lose its initial appeal. If we take Overwatch, the first one, and League of Legends, for example, back in the early days, both of them were wars of trenches. Slow progress and holding down a front line was the most important thing. One misstep could be the difference between a won or lost team fight. While this is still somewhat true, that war of trenches feeling dissipated as more and more diving characters were added. LoL finally caught some pushback with now 163 champions. While Overwatch never really did cut flack on that front, true OG player will most likely understand that the same has happened. Holding out choke points tightly trying to pick off straggler was the most important thing. Now a team completely made up of divers is possible, which wasn't the case back then. Sometimes just maintenance is all a game needs. Just look at CSGO. While CS2 has been announced, changes are so minute, yet they cause a bunch of ruckus. Because fans got time, a lot of it, to get used to the game and how it works. They got used to a specific way of playing the game. It's also why League got a bit of pushback from champions that added mini games into the regular game, because it disturbed a lot of the flow of the game. For example, Skarner is still on the chopping block because of this very idea. Anyway, while this point is minute, losing your core player base to denaturing your game is something to be concerned about. Characters might give you money, but players leaving will lose you more in the long run. My second point has a lot to do with the bunch of backlash I referred to earlier. I did not mention the one from Overwatch 2 yet because this will be my prime example. Not taking your fans for idiots, or even worse, numbers on a graph. A lot of AAA game developing has been driven by numbers in the last decade, maybe even more, but we are feeling the effects pretty hard lately. From Overwatch 2 promising a PvE content as a major selling point, to only release the second iteration of the game without it, to then straight up abandoning project. Why? It's too much effort. The game is already getting enough money through battle passes. Why would you even put effort into that if people are already paying the company enough? Seems like a bad deal for them. If you have some massive changes coming, be transparent, explain the reason, have a discussion with the players. On that subject, I'm still angry at Riot for promising Dominion rank and later scrapping that idea entirely. Anyway, and listening to your players doesn't mean to use social platforms as freaking player support. When a player flags you something through official channels, it is already because they care a lot about the game. You shouldn't make them hop through additional hoops where you are not direct moderators. I'd talk again about the massive smurf problem on Valorant, but I have a 2-year-old video covering the subject and not much has changed since then. I'll just add that They started muting slash banning people bringing smurfing on the subreddit. So, while I understand that for the general community it is something annoying that constantly comes up, but for dev, that should be an indicator of how much of a problem this is. But nah, let's just push player support to social media that bans people talking about unpleasant things. And that is in combination with the ridiculous changes that Reddit is undergoing. Just leave this forsaken site already. Competitive integrity, my ass. Which bring me to my last point. Having a healthy competitive environment. There is nothing more boring than playing a competitive game against players trying hard that are nothing close to your skill level. Imagine having a yellow belt in a karate mini tournament. Everyone is happy and having fun while trying hard to win the whole thing. Now introduce a pseudo yellow belt in that mix that is in reality a black belt. I'm sure everyone in this tournament will have a blast. That is a lose-lose situation. Everyone else is getting crushed, having no fun whatsoever, knowing that they will lose. And the black belt, he might win the whole thing, but he didn't learn a single thing. He did that just to have a name over trophy, if even. In that case, I put a Smurf spin onto it. But you can't take that to the overly competitive kid actively drugging themselves or actively trying to sabotage other contestants or being a general piece of shit around everyone else. That kid wouldn't get invited anymore. Then why? Why are these toxic players allowed back constantly into the game with little to no repercussion? If you want actual communities and their steps to ensure competitive integrity, then go to speedrun.com. Directly in their terms of services, it states you are permitted to have exactly one account on the site. Alternate accounts will be banned. This is the kind of stuff that ensure respectful competition in the speedrunning scene. And when people are banned from speedrun.com, they are banned for 6 months at least. And if they try to cheat that ban by creating another account, then that ban gets extended and the extra account permabanned. Account sharing is just as bad. If someone is allowing someone else to play on their account, it will mess up the evaluation of the MMR of that account. It should also trip up some kind of instant ban. Ubisoft allegedly did that to a large Trackmania streamer, a streamer that did a cup of the day on someone else's account. IP switching should also be a massive indicator of account sharing, especially if it is at around key moments of that account history. Just unlocked ranked and the account switched countries, hit the lowest rank, and the same thing happened? That sounds like someone selling an account to me. Then why is that account not banned already? That would prevent easy access to illegitimate accounts. You can't rely only on IP switching, but in combination with key moments and or play style differences, you can be assured that that account is being sold, which is against term of services for most game, but never enforced. Why shouldn't you spend all your time into developing new characters? Because a lot more time should be put into making sure your system can't be abused. There is no point having an elaborate MMR slash ELO system if you can simply sidestep it by using an alternate or a Smurf account. There is no point suspending slash banning people if you can do the same thing. While you can get away with a lot of things in quick play slash normal modes, it shouldn't be the case for ranked. A ranked mode should be the equivalent to a season in competitive sports. People take it very seriously because that's how they get to the playoffs. They don't necessarily play with their friends due to skill level, but that part has been lost lately. Ranked just become the new default mode for pretty much all games. I have been a big fan of the long grindy sequence to access ranked. It gives you time to understand extensively the game before putting on gloves for the real challenge. If people don't like the game from the start, then why should they start comparing skill against other players? While I understand that the general gaming population wants to jump in ranked as soon as possible, there should be a way to ensure that those players will take the game as seriously as they can. I personally am not a fan of ranked mode being unlocked from the very start of you playing. I just started playing Omega Strikers, and I must say that my gear started grinding as soon as I noticed that you can play directly ranked from the start. I seriously have the feelings that smurfing is already a problem in that game, and that breaks my heart. Also, since their ranking system is not based off the Elo system, you can just play a massive amount and end up climbing rather easily, regardless of skill, which sucks because, anyway, that's a subject for another video. Since players want to jump into ranked as soon as possible, maybe you should give them the option to. Ask them to link a phone number to their account. That way, if they are just too toxic, throw games, do not take the game as seriously as they should in ranked, just ban them from ranked and consequently banning the linked phone number. Side note to all the you can just use a VoIP to run that verification. You can also detect the phone number being a VoIP. So you can just ban the usage of VoIP on registration. Either way, there needs to be something done to try and make having multiple accounts a chore. Some games scrap entirely the idea of a normal queue. While not a competitive game per se, Dead by Daylight just has a single queue, and depending on how you played during the game, you earn points if you played well or not. Which brings me to performance-based MMR, which in theory is a good idea. In practice, it's another thing. For those unfamiliar, it's a way to reward the players more by them playing well or punish them for playing poorly by affecting their matchmaking rating or MMR consequently. As soon as those words are heard by players or observations are made, things will start heading south pretty quickly. People might start gambling the system and ruin the experience of all other players. The prime example of that was the first Overwatch with their hard cap on perf based MMR at Diamond. I was around that elo, being a very flexible off-tank player, and it became a nightmare. The number of Genji players getting three-man counterpicked, refusing to switch character even though they weren't doing much was horrible. But they were still getting more elo on average than losing, while they were platinum because their stats were good, but they had a consistent below 50% win rate, which kept them at the cutoff point for perf-based MMR. But to the eye of the player, there should definitely be a way to show that they are doing well or doing poorly. Like Heroes of the Storm with their you did better than X% of Jaina players while doing X thing well. Or some sort of ultra hidden MMR, a bit like League of Legends with DLP/hidden MMR. It will cause some confusions from player, but in the end, if they constantly get carried in lower elo, they won't have much fun or learn much if they play too high compared to where they belong. While all this video is really nice in theory, video games are businesses now. Nothing will change as long as players are willing to spend money in the game. But just in case some companies are listening, here's a few points of action to make sure your competitive game doesn't die to poor maintenance. Always prioritize maintenance over content. If your competitive game has enough depth, it should be able to survive in a vacuum. In that time, you can iron out details surrounding community competitive integrity, which are essentially never ending. Be transparent. Some problems arise from an idea you already communicated. Say so, and not at the last second. In addition to being transparent, communicate steps taken to reduce smurfing and other community impacting action. This is good PR, but good PR doesn't beat good matchmaking. Looking at you, Valve. Yes, your game will eventually quote unquote die, either by yourself, the company who made the game releasing another entry, or by players being tired of it. But it's not by accelerating its death that you will help anyone. Anyway, by this point, I'm pretty disillusioned about the whole scene. It's kind of why I'm considering that the genre is dying. Companies take money to heart more than their game's well being. I just hope that at some point we see a return back to the roots of competitive gaming, where it was player versus player and not account versus account. This switch has been over a period of time where players realized that they could game the system and companies never caught up.